listening to Unfiltered with Muhammad, a podcast about personal growth and authentic leadership. If you're looking for tips on how to manage others, get ahead, and make your way up the corporate ladder, this is not the show for you. This podcast is about being of service to others, leading from the heart, and evolving into a better version of yourself. Each episode brings you motivated stories about unfiltered leadership and authentic leaders, those who involve others, use their influence to amplify diverse perspectives, and inspire teams to achieve collective results. If this sounds like you, keep listening. Good afternoon and welcome to the Unfiltered Podcast. This is the podcast for leaders who transform themselves into a better version of themselves so they can lead others. Unfiltered is the podcast for leaders who want to involve others in decision-making, use their influence to help them rise, and inspire them to become better human beings. Today, I have an unfiltered guest with me, Jeff Koerner. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you, Muhammad. I'm glad to be here. Looking forward to it.
Likewise. So a bit of background about Jeff. Jeff began his career in the insurance and financial services 31 years ago. He started a scratch agency and had the success that led him to become the director in the Chicago suburbs, where he held this position for 2 years before being promoted to regional vice president of the largest territory with roughly 1,000 producers. Congratulations. From this position, he was promoted to the COO of Atlanta-based Cotton States Insurance. During this time there, he helped transform the agency force, the selling of the regional office, and the transition to a new brand under Country Financial. After 6 years, he was promoted to the senior vice president of the agency for the entire country, a position he currently holds today. He's a heart-centered leader who believes in rolling up his sleeves and working with others to get their work done. And that's why he's my unfiltered guest today. Welcome, Jeff, and thank you once again for being my guest.
Yeah, thank you.
So excited to learn about you, to learn about what inspires you to become the leader that helps others become a better human being, a better person. I know offline that we shared some incredible stories about your leadership style, and we're definitely going to get into those today. But I'm going to start off with asking you to give a bit about yourself and why you believe that you're a leader that inspires others.
Yeah, well, let me start by saying I never really set out to be a leader. I just kind of did what I thought I should do. And as things developed, as others that I worked with had success, it was the company that asked me, would you assume a different role? I was in personal production for 12 and a half years before I went into management. And I can tell you that the decisions I make today as a leader, I often refer back to my experiences when I was in personal production. So it just kind of happened. It wasn't intentional. And I think some of the things that I do are just instinctual almost, and not necessarily something I read or learned, but just something that I've always done through personal experiences.
Thank you. And Jeff, that's why I say that you're a heart-centered leader. Heart-centered leaders are people who believe that, they have this leadership experience, not because they were given a role, but they've earned the right to inspire others, and they understand leadership because they model that sort of leadership for themselves. This is about role modeling and not role playing. So, you were in the role that people who now report to you, work with you, are on your team, and that you inspire every day. You understand their work. You understand the value that they bring. And this is why you can inspire them, because you've been there. And experience is, something that we don't give enough attention to, the experience of having been in the position, having been in the situation. That helps build on the empathy, because you can relate to your employees. You can help understand their situation. Can you give me an example of how you've woven this into the work that you do every day?
Yeah. Can I ask that question? I'm not sure I follow.
Yeah.
Say that again.
So, when we look at your leadership style, the fact that you bring this experience to the table because you've been there, you've been in their position, you've been in that role. Yeah. How does that allow you to understand and be more empathetic to the people that work with you that are on your team?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, our roles are extremely complex. You're being pulled in a lot of different directions every single day. And, if not intentional about your actions and what you do during the day, you'll spend the entire day putting out brush fires And when you go home that evening and you may say, what did I actually accomplish today? Customer satisfaction, absolutely. But we offer so much more than that. And it's the ability of when is the right time to get staff? When's the time to increase the staff? What are the roles of your staff? Hire to the position, never to the person. Make sure that the roles are clearly defined of what are the expectations of everyone on your team. And it's a little unnerving. You've got to take a chance. It's an expense. It's a commitment to someone else to, and many times, change careers to work for you. But knowing what to look for, I often told when I was a manager and bringing people into the business, I said, if you listen to what I will share with you and what I've done, I can get you to where I was in 5 years, in 3, and in 5 years, what took me 10. So it was just that having known what they've done made it much, much easier for me to relate to their situation.
And that's important in your business. We're talking about the insurance industry here. We're talking about, I'm sure that your employees have certain quotas that they need to meet on a daily, monthly, right? So there's expectations. By helping them understand that you've been there, you've done it, you know how to do it better, and you're ready to, sit beside them and share that experience with them. Coming from the person who's leading, somebody like you who's really at the helm, inspiring them, hey, this is how it can be done, this is how it can be done better, that's going to resonate with them. A lot of times we see our leaders as these distant figures, people that we just see from a distance. We don't really connect with them. Maybe we don't even meet them one-on-one. Why do you feel it's important to create that relationship with the people that you work with? It can be anybody else to provide that mentoring. Why do you do it yourself?
Yeah, we're going to ask our team to do a lot of things that they don't necessarily understand the reason why we're asking them to do it. But they have to trust you in order to follow. And trust is something that it takes time to earn. And many times you have to listen before you can fully be trusted. And when I was new to the role, and in many roles, I would take the long walk around the office just to talk to people. And I think one of the keys to leadership is learning from the experience of everyone in the office, in the environment. No one person is ever smarter than the group as a whole. And when I look to leadership, if we can get everybody on the same page, everyone communicating and working together, you can do some really special things. But it starts with them knowing you as a person, knowing that you've taken the time to care. And I think company goals can also be personal goals. And just why did you come to work today? I need to know that, who you are as a person, and then the rest will follow.
Jeff, listening to you inspires me because, I've often been managed by leaders who distance themselves and don't understand that they have to role model this behavior. Sometimes, we're told, hey, this is what I expect you to do. Don't expect me to do it. I'm busy running the company. I'm busy getting, going from $1 million to 10 million or whatever, your quotas are. But this is how we expect you to get work done. However, when employees see their leaders actually role modeling that behavior and leading by example and using words like, I'm listening to you, I care about you. And when you're authentic, that's going to resonate with those employees. You harness a free workforce. You're creating a workforce that is now working with you. They want to be there. They're engaged. They want to see your success. They share in your vision. They're ready to roll up their sleeves and work hard to help you accomplish your mission. And when we look at companies that have been very successful, it's because their employees buy into this vision. A lot of the time, and I'm sure as a leader and someone who is helping to take your company to the next level, we see that our ultimate goal is to serve our client. And I always use the example of, the drive-through. I won't name any names, but you go through the drive-through. And if you don't have someone who is excited about serving you when you come up to that window, if you don't have somebody in the back creating those hamburgers and serving them up to you so that you can give them to your customer, guess what? No cars are going to drive through that drive-through. So if we don't get our staff to be excited about the company and about our shared vision and working together to accomplish collective goals, we're not going to be able to accomplish those goals for our clients. So I would like to ask you, you mentioned earlier that this wasn't something that you woke up one day and said, hey, I'm going to be a leader. But you walked into this role and became very organic to the work that you do. Did this start with a particular transition? Was there a time when, Jeff woke up and said, hey, this is, my new role. Here are my new responsibilities. Or was it something you learned over time?
Certainly over time. There's certain things that must be experienced in order to truly understand and appreciate. But I can tell you my time as a rep when I was in personal production, the knowledge is important, but everybody has this. And I would say that we live in a world that's no longer a knowledge business. That's at all of our fingertips. We can tap out on the computer and find a plethora of information, anything that we want. But it's the ability for people to act on that is the key. And how you establish that with clients, with employees. Two questions I would always ask. And, it's, what do you think? How do you feel? And then you're given permission to say, here's what I found. And if, you don't necessarily say them exactly that way, you adapt it to the audience. But once you've taken the time to listen, you now have permission to move forward. And I think with that, it just encompasses a whole lot of things. Number one, it says, I've taken the time to care and listen, know a little bit more about you. Now, here's what I found. And, I can understand where you're coming from, which says you're relatable, which says just differentiates you from probably someone that they've ever worked with before. I want to share a story with you when I went to Atlanta for the first time. So I come down to Atlanta and, we all talk about this culture and, I think culture is something that you experience more than what you're told. If I say someone, well, we're going to have this empowerment in culture around here and everybody matters and everyone's important, we're all on the same team. And then I differentiate and distance myself from anyone. It'll be seen through rather quickly. So I come down to Atlanta. My oldest child's still in high school, so they stayed behind. I know no one really. I get off of the airplane at the airport. I get a ride to a parking lot where there's a car waiting for me. And I'm living in a hotel trying to find out where my family's going to call home. And in the beginning, I work a lot of, I should say in the beginning and still today, a lot of half days. And what I mean by half days is 12-hour days. You start early, you finish late. So, my assistant, and when I was in Atlanta, was in at 5:30 every morning. I'd get in about 6:30 every morning just to beat the traffic. And I'm leaving the office one night, and it's about 7 o'clock at night. And the Atlanta heat can be kind of hot. And I've got this great parking spot. It's got my name on it. It's the closest one to the door. Upon arrival, I said, hey, the first thing we're going to do is get rid of all these assigned parkings. I don't need that. To me, I was encouraged. They said, hey, it's a part of our culture, right? It's a part of our history. Don't change it, at least not now. Show respect for the prior position. Use the parking spot. So reluctantly, okay, I'll use it. So I'm coming out at 7 o'clock at night. It's kind of hot. And across the parking lot quite a way, I see a car with the hood up. And it would have been real easy just to get in my car and go home and no one would have said a thing. But I thought, you know what? It's the end of a long day. Probably not how he wanted his day to end. Certainly not how I wanted mine to end. So I walk over and I said, hey, probably not how you wanted to end your day, huh? He says, no. I said, well, what seems to be the problem? He says, well, car won't start. I said, good news for both of us. That's easy to fix. I said, now I'm brand new to town. I've been here less than a week. I'd offer to jump your car, but I don't have any jumper cables. In fact, I don't even have a car. This is a temporary car on loan. But I do know there's an auto parts store up the road. Let's go there and get some jumper cables. He's like, no, it's not the battery. I just put a new one in. I said, good for you. I had some old cars in the day. It's your alternator, and I've swapped one out before. Now, like I said, I'm brand new in town. I don't even have any tools. This gives me a reason to get tools. And, let's take that out. I think it's 3 bolts. And he's like, no, I got it to a truck coming. I said, hey, let's save the $100. We'll put that towards the alternator that you need to replace anyway. And he's like, no, sir, it'll be here any minute. They're going to be here any minute. I said, well, I'll hang out with you until it gets here. it was about a minute, and the tow truck's there. I said, well, hey, good luck with the car. I hope you get it fixed, and I'll leave. So I'm in the office the next morning, and I'm doing my walk around, and people are kind of staring at me. Now I know I'm still the new guy, but there's just a different look in their eye. I get back to my office, and there's a call waiting for me. And I call a person back, and they said, hey, did you offer to change an alternator last night? I said, well, yeah, I did. And they said, you were really going to do it, weren't you? And I said, well, of course I did. They said, no, but you took your tie off, you put your tie in your jacket, you put your jacket on your briefcase, you were going to get in there. And they said, well, that person you stopped to help and worked for the company almost 40 years. And he didn't even have a conversation with the old former president the way that he did with you that night. And everybody's talking about it right now. And it was that little act of kindness that I think really created a culture of, hey, he is different. He is willing to help us all out. And hey, we would have replaced that alternator given the chance.
And it's amazing. It's those little acts of kindness. And it's sometimes what we might see as the most insignificant gesture can have the greatest impact. You had no idea this person worked for you, yet alone with somebody who's been there for 40 years. You just wanted to help somebody. And, that spoke volumes with the people that work with you, because it showed.
Hey, let me add one more thing to that story is, before he retired, and he has since retired, he said, I want to take you out to lunch. Can you take an afternoon off? I not only want to take you out to lunch, but
you have to ask the boss, right?
I want to see I want you to see my car collection. I've owned that car since I was 16 years old.
Wow.
And I want you to see all the cars that I have in my garage and how I've taken care of them over the years. So it was a fun afternoon. We took the afternoon off, had a nice lunch, and I got to see all of his cars. And really, that car meant a lot more to him than you would have thought, and for good reason.
And I mean, let me ask you this, Jeff. How do you think that experience resonated with the rest of your staff when they're working together on a project and somebody, is experiencing some sort of an obstacle? It makes me wonder how they're going to behave now, because they've seen their boss, their leader behaving in a certain way, right?
Oh, absolutely. It gained me credibility I could have never have asked for on my own. I had to earn it. And again, it wasn't done with that intent at all. And I think that's why it was so authentic and genuine. But I will tell you, after that, people would walk into my office and say, can I have 30 minutes of your time? I've been thinking about something for years and I've wanted to share with leadership. I think you'll listen. And that became like a regular thing, because they had great ideas. They were the closest to the issues at hand, and typically have the best ideas of how we can get through them. So,
when I look at the Lego of leadership and listening to how you put it together, you discover, and this isn't, brain surgery, a lot of us don't overcomplicate it. When it comes to sharpening our emotional intelligence, we think that we need to read this, 10,000 page book and instructions, but you've really kept it simple. You started by creating an authentic relationship. You did that by building trust. You built trust by learning to listen. When you listen to others, you inevitably learn something about them. When you learn, you acted out of compassion and kindness, and that's love. I mean, and when you learn to love, you became a leader that others wanted to emulate, others wanted to be like, and you inspired them to become leaders in their own ways. And, this is, that's what I call the 4 L's. This is how we get to know others, as we listen, we learn, we love, and we lead. And it just goes to show that when we're authentic about it, when our intention is really to make a difference and to be a good human being, when we're not doing it because somebody is watching, it's like giving charity. The best form of charity is the one you give in secret. Nobody has to know what you gave, but the difference that it makes. And I think, the difference giving does, and, has on us. Sometimes we think that giving, the impact is what it's going to have on the other person, and it has an incredible impact. But what giving does to our bodies, to our minds, to our hearts, it's incredible. And you gave the best, and that you gave of yourself, of your time, and you continue to give. Tell me why that's important. It's part of who Jeff is.
Yeah, I would say, you say giving starts the receiving process, right? Um, when I was new in the business, when I was new in leadership, it's that meet and greet exchange. What does it sound like? Hey, who are you? What do you do for a living? But if you want to differentiate yourself, don't be the person that says, hey, I'm in the insurance and financial services. I would love to review what you have. It's a no obligation. No, they're expecting you to do that. Say, hey, maybe I'll come back to you 15 minutes later and say, I really enjoyed getting to meet you. Tell me a little bit more about how I can help you and your business. I come across a lot of people in my daily work, but how would I know when one of them wants or needs what you offer? And suddenly that giving, that how many people do that? Very few. And you become different. When I first went into production and we had great success with when I was manager recruiting reps, I said, listen, y'all just got licensed. You're all really smart at what you do. Now it's time to communicate the way you did before you got licensed, because we're asking people to make decisions. We need to communicate in a language that they understand. Think about your prior experiences. What didn't you like? What did you like? And now be the best that you can be. Differentiate yourself. Never surprise someone with why you're meeting with them that evening. And you'll be amazed how much better you feel about your role and how much better they feel about knowing what to expect. You mentioned the drive-through earlier. The reason we like certain places over the others is because it's predictable. We know that if we're in Illinois or Arizona, it's pretty much going to be the same experience. And that's what we're counting on. And that's what our clients want as well. Knowing that when I refer someone to you, they're going to be treated differently, but yet similar to the way that I was treated.
Well, you built that respect and that trust. And I'm thinking, in any industry, those two features are important. But when you think about the insurance business, you're creating that relationship. You need to grow that relationship. You want to go from, signing a contract for 100, persons to maybe 1,000 people, right? You're not going to do that just because you've got a great product. You're going to do that because you've got a great relationship. You've built it on trust. And to your point, they're going to come back to you and say, what would you recommend? And isn't that the sweet spot when your client can come back to you and ask for guidance? I mean, what they're basically telling you is, what are you going to sell us next? But that's not what you're doing. It's not transactional. What you're actually saying is, how can I serve you? How can I help you? And the best way to do that, if we ever have a message, no one is going to be ready to listen to our message until we have commanded the attention of their heart. What do I mean by that? Once you've owned somebody's heart by telling them you are there to serve them, you have their full attention. They will listen to you. They will listen to your message. And that is what I'm hearing from you. You've done that with your staff. You've shown them, you walk around the office, you role model what leadership looks like. I'm present, I'm available, I'm accessible. Come into my office, I'm willing to listen, share your ideas, because by listening to you, we can create, we can innovate, we can grow. And you've done that. Can you tell me a bit about how that leadership style has enabled you, empowered you to actually move into the role that you're currently in and to grow your business, and why it works?
Yeah, well, I think actions speak louder than words. So, fellow reps, can remember when we worked side by side, fellow managers, when I was a manager, can remember the work and conversations that we had then. And when I ask people to do things in today's terms, listen, I know there's a position that's going to become available that will look attractive to you, but for reasons I can't tell you today, I want you to turn it down. There'll be something else in the future, but I can't or am not privileged to share that with you today. And when they're willing to wait because of the relationships that we've had, and then when that right opportunity presents itself, it makes sense. And when you've done that repeatedly over time, people talk, they share, they say, hey, what do you think? Jeff asked me to wait on this or do that. There's a reason, and there's a reason he couldn't tell you, and you'll find out with time. But this was my situation and how it played out. I'm sure yours will be the same. And even if I do make mistakes, and we all make mistakes, that's part of what we do. None of us are perfect. If we do think we're perfect, we need to push ourselves a little bit harder. But they'll know that it wasn't an intentional mistake, that it just maybe was more of a situation or timing. And that's okay. That there are no guarantees, but that it wasn't intentional, if that makes sense.
And Jeff, respecting the privacy of that mistake and the situation or people involved, but could you share with us an example of a time that you have made a mistake? What was the impact and how did you respond or kind of fix what you didn't do well the first time?
Yeah, I think all mistakes, they're calculated to a certain extent. There's really big ones and there's small ones, and then the majority falls somewhere in between. But not all of the people that we put into leadership excel. Just because you were a great individual producer doesn't necessarily mean you can lead a team of 25 or 100, whatever the number may be. And I think when those situations happen, you have to have the courageous conversations. You can't ignore it and hope it gets better. It was just like bad news doesn't go away if you ignore it. It only gets worse. It keeps you up at night. Address the situation. Try to correct it. But if it's not correctable, then it's about an exit with dignity of how do you do this together to where the person that may be getting transitioned out of leadership had a element of control in the process, had a landing spot. They were valuable in the role they had before, and they can be valuable in it again. But it has to be done right. There's no reason to embarrass someone on the way out, because if you do, it'll make it harder to bring someone in the future. They can look at prior transitions that maybe didn't work and see that the family's still okay, that the person is still thriving, but just in a different role.
I think so often we look at people who excel as individual contributors, and then we say, hey, this person is great. Let's take her and put her in a leadership role to lead people. Well, she excelled maybe in that individual contribution because that's what she got to focus on, and she didn't want to manage people. So sometimes, as leaders, we make the mistake of putting people in places where maybe they don't belong. We need to see where their natural tendencies are and, maybe push them out of the comfort zone a bit. But to the point that you made earlier, not every great skilled individual is going to be very skilled at leading people, right?
Yeah.
But what I also appreciate about the story that you told is when you recognize that that person maybe was not the best in the role, you didn't shame them. You didn't make them feel bad. Even when you ended the relationship, you didn't really end it. You just decided to transition that person, whether transition out of the company or out of that role. But I love the words that you use, courage and dignity. You recognize that you as a leader, rather than being that top-down, autocratic, behavior of, hey, like I'm the boss and I can fire and hire whenever I want. But no, you actually recognize that we require courage to behave in a respectful, authentic way when we're dealing with other people. Why? Because they deserve dignity.
Yeah.
That is powerful. Again, when I think about some of the best leaders that I've had the pleasure of working with or for, or I think about how they've inspired me by being such a good human being. And that's why I'm so thrilled on this podcast to bring guests like you who show that, really demonstrate that it's about role modeling, not role playing. We get people to do things for us and with us and share in our vision because they believe in our behavior. They believe in building the behaviors of trust. And trust is the foundation of all strong relationships. You mentioned earlier about intention. That was maybe not my intention, but intention has integrity behind it, right? Mm-hmm. And when you are seen as a person who has integrity, people naturally warm up to you and they trust you. Let me ask you. So we see Jeff as a person who has a lot of integrity, somebody who cares and listens. But Jeff, you mentioned that we all make mistakes, but we all find ourselves sometimes in destructive conflict. Is there an example of maybe when you found yourself in a less optimal situation, and how did you behave? How did you react or respond to it?
Well, we're all going to get there sometimes. Sometimes it's just the inherent nature of the other individual. They can just be vengeful and upset with life. Not just me. I'm just the next person. I'm not the first person. In those situations, I think you do have to be a little more direct and a little more, what do I want to say? less empathetic. You've tried the empathetic route. It hasn't worked. There's now chatter going on behind your back, and you need to call it out, but then ultimately make a decision that, I can remember one producer that whenever I met with the producer and a manager and a director, I would bring them in together. I said, listen, if I meet with the four of you independently or the three of you independently, I'm going to feel like I had three different conversations. I will have said the same exact thing, but you all filtered it differently. And I'm in one of those meetings, and the producer just basically told me, well, my manager's no good, my director's no good, and the company's no good. And I said, we can stop right now. You've convinced me of one thing. This isn't a good fit. And he said, no, I didn't. I said, no, you did say that. You've insulted the integrity of all those you're working with. And your production, truthfully, is at a point where we'll be okay. The company's going to be all right, but you're not going to change. And I know that. And for us to pretend isn't going to work. So we'll begin the process. But this is just not one that continues on. And, it wasn't the first one of those conversations. It's the first time we did it as a group. But I would also say it was the first time that we ended it. And even the field, they understood. And I think there was a level of respect of, hey, just wasn't a good fit for the culture that we've created. And probably never was going to be.
And fit's important. When we think about an organization, why would I want to work? Well, when I think as a consumer, why would I want to buy insurance from Country Insurance, for example, right? I would, why do I buy a particular piece of electronics for $1,500, right? It's not because I think that phone is worth $1,500. We buy into the vision and the really, we buy into the stories that those organizations tell us and into their value system. So my values mesh with your value. I'm going to feel that I can work with you, that I want to work with you. And if we're, bringing on employees, training them, spending a lot of money in coaching and mentoring them and teaching them the skills and the competencies to be able to succeed, but the values don't mesh, that person could be maybe one of the best producers, but they don't share your vision. How would you deal with that?
Yeah, it does happen. And, it's going to happen in all organizations. And I think you have to be very direct with it. And you can't, some of your great producers are very, very persuasive in how they can spin a conversation or a situation that happened. But ultimately, if it's backed by integrity, you can't argue that. If things were not done correctly, that will show itself out with time. And the one situation where I said, listen, we're going to call the client and get to the bottom of it. I've listened to the both of you. With both of you in the room, we're going to have a conversation now with the client. And as I picked up the phone, the advisor said, you don't need to make the call. You made your point, and I'll resign tonight. And I hate talking about the things that don't work out, but then it allows you to spend more time on the things that do work out. So, and I think that's the important part. Really believe in people before they believe in self. One of the best compliments I get when people retire, that they say, I look back on my career, and the funnest time that I had was when we did X. That was a crazy 2 or 3 year period, but the amount of change and what we accomplished is something I'll never forget. We all worked extremely hard, but the results were worth it. We changed a group of people in a way that their lives and the lives of our clients will be influenced, impacted for years to come, if not generations. And the work was worth it. It was worth the lift. And so glad we did that. So, and
the hard work, when you look at how you can create an organization that cares about the employee, an organization that cares for the team and that cares for the community and the client. Again, this is how our vision comes together and how we can use our values to govern the work that we get done, because we understand we're accountable to our employees. We have to behave in a certain way because we expect our employees to behave a certain way. We have to behave in a certain way with our client, and we have to behave in a certain way with our stakeholders and our community as well. And that's a balance. The minute that balance starts to go awry, the minute that you start to put more emphasis on your employees and less on your clients, something's going to give, vice versa.
Yeah.
If it's always about the client and the bottom dollar, profits over people, well, you're not going to harness a free workforce, one that's going to work for you. But you've got to find that balance. How, what can you, this is where I come to the unfiltered thought of the week. So I ask the guest, I say, given your expertise and your background and where you excel as a leader, what piece of advice or learning or awakening that you've experienced could you share with my listeners? And here I'm going to ask you, in terms of creating that balance, because you've done it wonderfully. You're a leader who's been able to roll up his sleeves and get in there and help people. You walk around, you walk the walk and talk the talk, you role model the behavior, but you're also somebody who has risen to a certain level of success because you've met your numbers and you're keeping your stakeholders happy because you're building a successful business model. How have you, Jeff, been able to manage that balance and accomplish it?
So I number one, I think it starts with awareness, right? You've got to be aware of balance. There's quality of life and standard of living, and the two are very, very different. I think you can have both, and the likelihood of getting both is much more realistic if you're aware of it. I'm gonna mention a word here that I think is overused, and that's empowerment. The farther that you advance in your career, the more important empowerment becomes. Any successes that I've had in life, in all of life, are the result of how others have responded to me or what we did. And asking talented people, what do you think? How would you do this? Is much easier said than done, because as you elevate your career, you think, I'm earned this, I'm smarter, I know things other people don't. And you may, but one of the most hard and difficult things for a leader to do is step away and say, am I empowering my team in the way that I was empowered when I was on the path upward? And I think an easy way to measure that is the more success you have, the more control of schedule and time you should possibly have. A leader that says, I'm too busy to absolutely do anything else, is someone who's not empowering those that report to them enough. It's so difficult to do because maybe it makes you vulnerable. It's a giving up of some control. But if you've got the right team, and you typically do, you've appointed them in many cases or inherited the team that you have, they're good quality people, and you know that because you've taken the time to work and get to know them. Let them make decisions. Have them sit on boards of directors that maybe you were asked to be a part of, but you politely said, I can't do it, but here's someone else that would represent the organization extremely well. Everybody wins in that. They're able to give more time, more attention. They feel this sense of, hey, Jeff believes in me at a higher level. I'm now representing not just our company, but the industry.
Right.
That's pretty special. And again, you've got to be really thoughtful. Am I empowering my team to the full ability that I can? And most leaders aren't. You have to really, really go back. And the higher you go, the more important that asking others to be a part of the growth matters.
Well, it's similar to what you said earlier. Asking is the other side of listening. Yeah. And you're asking, you're looking for their input, you're listening to their, you're letting them weigh in so that you can get their buy-in. And what I'm hearing when I'm listening to you is a lot of leaders have this insecurity that if I move to the side and I empower, we need to put power back in empowerment. We need to make sure that the people we're actually supporting, we can empower them, use the verb to actually see the action. I can delegate that responsibility. I can ask somebody to take it on. I can support them, and then I can celebrate their wins. And that's not going to make me less of a leader. That's not going to cause me to lose my respect or my credibility, as you say, with either the stakeholders or other leaders in the organization or my employees. In fact, what they're going to see is I have a future here. So-and-so, who is not the leader, who is not the CEO or COO or right, is actually helping to lead and make decisions because they're involved at the table where decisions are being made. I, as an employee, whether I'm 20 or 50, I'm going to look and say, I have a future. I can grow because this is an organization that believes in investing in me and empowering me. And that's really strong. As a leader, when we don't do that, when we get insecure and we think that we have to manage by, being on top of others, superior to others. I can't stand that word, who's your superior? No one is my superior except the being that created me, right? If you believe in God.
Ah.
So the people that I work with, we have different roles and responsibilities, and we report to different people, and there are different expectations. And we're rewarded financially in different ways based on those roles and the expectations. But nobody is necessarily more important than another. It's like, do you sit across in a rectangular table where there's somebody at the head of the table? Or do you go back to our natural way of sitting around in a circle where we all contribute to the perfect circular, we are all part of this whole, and the engineer is not more important than the individual contributor. The producer is not necessarily more important than the manager. They all have a role to play. And when you take one of them out of the circle, that circle has a gap.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate the insight that you brought. I appreciate the level of heart-centered approach to listening and caring and leading. And those are the sort of leaders that we need. This is what I call unfiltered leaders who understand, leaders who nurture, who are focused, leaders who lead and listen and learn. They're driven, they're resilient, and they believe in the team. So I want to thank you for being that leader and actually congratulate you because it's rewarding to see people who believe and role model that behavior. So all the best to you, and thank you for being my unfiltered guest today, Jeff. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All the best. Take care.
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to Unfiltered, the show about authentic leadership and personal growth. Like what you heard? Click subscribe, share it, and tell a friend about it. And don't forget to leave a rating.